Greetings, Warlords. Rodge here. Welcome to Saga Thursday, the show all about the skirmish miniatures game from Studio Tomahawk. I am joined today by Dan. Dan, how's it going?
It's going great, Rodge. How are you doing?
Good. So you are a new face on the show, but anybody on the Discord will know your username, Gossard267, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, for better or worse, I guess. But yeah.
Okay. Where does that username come from?
So my favorite band is Pearl Jam, and Stone Gossard is their main guitarist who wrote most of their early songs.
Okay. What's the 267? What's the meaning there?
Totally random. Way
Nice.
back. So you may have noticed I got the archaic Hotmail address. This goes way back to me going off to college, having to get a real email address of my own. I plug in some numbers and it's just stuck with.
That's funny. Yeah. I still have my old Hotmail with a weird thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you are here today to talk about the Persians. So thank you for volunteering and agreeing to chat about these guys. So this is one more band. I played it once in a team game against Charles. I had Stephen Hollowell. This is when I went to Kansas City. I can't really remember much about the game. So I'm going to be kind of relying on you mostly to lead us way here. And it's an interesting war band for sure. What drew you to the Persians?
Well, I've got a group of guys here that I game with regularly. So in part, it was, I want to try to pick something that we were all talking about it when Alexander came out. What are people interested in that nobody else is going to have? So we have some variety, which turned out to be wise because, as will come up probably in the review, I play against a lot of successors' armies.
Yeah.
So it's good. It is different. And we can talk a little bit later about the warband's, I guess, competitive reputation. But at least in my experience, quite rare that I actually see anybody playing it. Charlie Clay, who I think you may have had on the show before, he plays Persians a lot. But other than him, I just don't see him that much. So I like the uniqueness of it. And then the other reason was I tend to be drawn to armies that have something really weird about them. So my first army in Saga was the Polish, if that gives you a sense of where I'm coming from on that.
Okay. No slight intended against our Polish viewers.
No, it's a very unique board. It does things that no other army does, and it's got strange abilities, right? And as we'll see here, some of these are not what I would call strange abilities, but there's one or two that I think are pretty distinctive, one in particular. And so that also I thought, that looks pretty interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with you. I haven't really seen this warband played a lot. My experience is mostly Adepticon, probably like you. In the local area, I haven't really seen anybody. They are distinct for the models. It's not a play one, paint one, play many per se, but the full range is out there in Victrix. A couple bags, I believe, would probably suffice to build the army. So probably after our video here, there might be a run on Victrix sprues, maybe. We'll see.
That's true. There are one or two exceptions, though, which I'll call out when we go through the equipments. I did go the Victrix route myself, so that is attractive. If you stick with the more core options in the equipment list, you really can get it all done in Victrix plastic. Maybe they have a sale or whatever. You can just pick up everything you need, yeah.
Cool. All right, well, let's jump over to the equipment options here. Slideshow's all out of order. All right, let's jump to the median Persians, which, so this format is interesting. I believe this is the, I know why my slideshow, it's on automatic instead of manual. All right. Okay. So I believe this is the oldest warband that you can play currently, because the Persians toppled the Assyrians or the Babylonians. Somebody over there, around the Fertile Crescent area. I don't know if you know the history there yourself, Dan?
Yes, I mean there's a significant amount of scholarship out there that kind of points to, we think of, a lot of people I think of the Roman Empire as the first really big organized empire, but really a lot of what we would look at as interesting or distinctive about the Roman Empire, the kind of administrative sophistication, the number of different and diverse peoples, some of the relative liberties around religious expression, things like that, were all done in, not uniformly, but had kind of a precedent with the Persian Empire. So I think you're right that unless you want to argue that like some of the Greek city-state stuff could replicate very early Greek city-states, I think, yeah, like the median warband played as medians is probably the oldest thing you can play in Saga until we get our my hoped for Bronze Age book.
Yeah, we're all hoping that it keeps going that direction. A lot of cool cultures in the area stretching way back there, but for now we just got the medians, and so their equipment's pretty straightforward compared to the other ones. Warlock could be on a horse or on foot, essentially. Your Hearthguard's warriors are either mounted or on foot with bows in combined formation. So that's two options. They're either mounted or they're in the combined formation. Is that right?
That's correct. So you can do them either way. Okay. It's an equipment selection, essentially, which, doesn't make a lot of sense, right? The guys with horses weren't in Sparbara formations, but in Saga, it's totally permissible to say, hey, this time I'm going heavy on combined, this time I'm going heavy on the mounted if you have the models.
Sure. So at deployment, you'll put them down and make your determination. Okay, we'll get in the combined formation in a second. We'll just say the levies are equipped with javelins. So for combined formation, this book was kind of unique. It got kind of like a hot fact when it came out. I don't know what the timing was. I feel like it was within like a month or two or three. I don't know if you can remember.
It was certainly within the first year. I mean, it was pretty quick. It was not really the FAQ that I think some people were expecting for the Persians, but it targeted the combined formation. Yep. Yeah,
so I think essentially before, the main difference is it could go into terrain. It was already slow, so going into terrain didn't really, it was kind of better to be in terrain, where with the way that it's been fact, you kind of want to stay out of terrain, which is kind of a reoccurring theme in the ancients times here. You got chariots don't want to go in terrain, Sarissa's phalanx don't want to go in terrain. We got combined formation that doesn't want to go in terrain. Why don't you, this is a whole paragraph of description here, but just in your words, tell us about the combined formation. How's it different from just no special equipment or being equipped with bows, for example?
Yeah, so just a little context here, at least as I see it. I feel like Saga, previously to this, has made several attempts to reflect the idea of a combined formation, the idea of a single unit that has both some melee/defensive capability and integrated shooting, right? So we saw this with Age of Invasion Romans, crops up against with Last Romans, and we even see it hinted at least in the pre-FAQ Byzantine board.
Yeah,
but
so they
like a unit, right? It was an ability that created the sense.
Correct. Yeah, so it's like a one-off thing to shoot. Typically, is how it's been represented. So this is like
it's an actual unit or an actual equipment type. So what does it do? First, as you said, it can be Hearthguard or Warlord with the medians. It'll be different when we get to the other. The way I think about it is just start with the baseline no equipment version of those. 5/5 Hearthguard, 4/4 Warriors is your starting point, and then we're going to modify it. First thing, as you mentioned, the unit will be equipped with bows. So it can shoot L, and it can activate back-to-back to shoot L's because it's got bows. The next thing is that even though it has bows, there is no penalty to its armor.
Okay. So the Warriors stay 4/4 and the Hearthguards stay 5/5.
Which all sounds amazing so far, right? Because normally you get the bow warriors, the English have them, the Romans have them, right?
Sure.
They're armor 3/3, right? So they got some challenges in the open. And this goes to what you said about the FAQ, which I'll come back to. So again, 4/4, they do have bows, can shoot back to back, no armor penalty. And on top of that, as long as they're entirely in open terrain, they can still close ranks. So they don't even lose that ability.
So we hit all the benefits here.
Yep. So all those things sound pretty sweet. They are pretty sweet. But there are downsides, of course. So the first is that they can only move and charge S. So that's just, they're slow, is the short version of that. They also only have 1/2 their standard aggression in melee. So going back to the bow warriors as our reference, while they have poor armor, they do retain the standard aggression of warriors. Not so here. We have 1/2 aggression. So to make it more concrete, if I field 1 point of combined formation warriors with my median Persians, I do not get 8 attack dice. I get 4 in melee. And of course, if I close ranks with that unit, that gets cut in half. So I'm down to 2, assuming I'm at full strength. So it is a unit that is kind of as resilient in melee as a regular unit of warriors, but is far less threatening to the opponent in melee than regular warriors.
Yeah, it's even like a 12-man unit would be 6 attacks.
Down to 3 if you close ranks, right? So yes.
And you have fewer attacks to begin with, so like the penalty for closing ranks is like diminished as well. A full unit of regular warriors would lose 4 attacks going by closing ranks, so you're only losing 2 attacks by closing ranks. And we'll see. I mean, I believe a lot of the board is geared towards shooting, so I think you're kind of okay with that trade-off if you can take them down with shooting most of the time. Is that?
It depends on who you're fighting, right? So I'll talk about some of the opponents and the experiences I've had with them when we get to the actual abilities. But the other thing with this unit is, of course, the terrain penalty you mentioned. So they can go into terrain. And if they do, though, if it is uneven terrain or dangerous, that you wouldn't normally do it, but you could, they immediately take a -1 penalty to their armor on both sides, shooting and melee. So these become 3/3s again. And they cannot close ranks anymore as long as they're there. This is a tactic that, for instance, the Numidians can use to actually turn 1 wipe out a combined formation warrior with javelin shooting, is to pull them into terrain, especially a swamp where there's no cover. Even better, though, let's say it's solid terrain, if you can make it so that they only get partially into the cover.
Yeah.
Now they're 3/3s, you're going to drop 35 javelin shots or whatever on them. I've seen that nearly kill a unit saved by 1 save. So terrain they're allergic to terrain somewhat in a different way, but meta, similar to Greek city-states and certain successors builds.
Yeah. It seems like basically they have all the worst characteristics of the combined unit when they go into terrain. They don't get the armor bonus. They can't close ranks. They get the aggression penalty. Just...
Yeah, no, there is a reason to do it. I'll call it a niche reason to do it. And the reason to do it, I think, is when you're facing the Indians, and you're going to take 40 shots turn 1, putting them entirely in solid cover, they go back up to 4, but they get a 3-up save. So
negates,
if the threat is shooting, specifically, it's worth it. But otherwise, no, you don't want to put them in terrain under normal circumstances. It's bad.
Okay, cool. That's the combined formation. Let's move on to the Achaemenid Persians. And so this would be kind of a later period. So this is who Alexander the Great was fighting. I guess I don't know the cutoff between the... I'm sure there's a dynasty change or something in there. The history.
Yeah, there was a change of dynasty there, and it is also, though, a significant shift in kind of calendar years here. And I guess I should know, because we talked about the Victrix models earlier. Victrix describes their range as Achaemenid Persians, even though many people like myself might use them to make large Sparbara warrior units that are intended to be played as medians. I'm not sure there is a proper plastic manufacturer. In fact, even metal, it's hard to find someone that is a real median look with the longer cloaks and everything. They're out there, but it's a little harder to find that if you want to have a real, if you will, median warband.
Got it. Yeah, the case with many war bands in Saga. They'll straddle a few hundred years of history at the least, and it would be quite foolish to assume they look the same at the end as they do at the beginning. So, but this version of the warband, you get quite a few more options. So one of them isn't your warlord, who just has to be on a horse. Your Hearth Guards are on horses or deployed on foot. If on foot, they can be no equipment or combined formation with bows. You can include up to 2 scythe chariots or 1 unit of elephants. Your warriors are on horses, on camels. That's the amazing part to me. Yeah, love that. No real restriction there. They can be on foot. No equipment options there. And you can include the mercenary hoplite warriors. So kind of like the Greek mercenaries, essentially, or the Anatolian Greek city-states under their control, however you want to spin it. You can't do a whole warband of these guys. I checked, just had to double check. You probably wouldn't want to do it anyways, but I had to check. And then the levy are equipped with bows. So this version is probably, I don't know, would you say there's probably like a core that you want to take that most warbands would fit into? Or
to a
is
degree.
it just wild?
So this is, just in my opinion, the significantly stronger version of the Persian army. And I think probably the one that gives most of their reputation for strength. So there's a couple things I'll highlight on the equipment here. So first of all, as you said, it's much broader. Let's go back to the medians just for a second. Let's assume you're playing over objectives and you're facing a very popular army, the successors. You've got very limited choices. You've got a very slow unit that hates the melee and wants to shoot. And then you've got horses. That's your only offensive punch.
Yeah.
So when you want to go fight over an objective, you actually have nothing that's good at that, right? You're not going to send javelin levies in against successor phalanxes unless you want to watch them die. So, and maybe you do. We'll talk about an ability where maybe that's okay, right?
Okay, yeah.
But when you go to the Achaemenids, you get the power is in part the flexibility. If you have the models, you sit down and look who your opponent is, look what the mission is, and this time you might say, I'm going to be fielding a bunch of vanilla Persian warriors, because that's what the objective or the scenario calls for. You might see a bunch of horsemen over there and say, I got the camel models. The camels are going down. You got the mercenary hoplites, and I would say that the bow levy are another critical element. You're going to have at least 1 point of these, probably 2. We'll again get into the board abilities, but when people say the Persian army is a shooting warband, remember, for 1 point, the medians get 4 shots. For 1 point, the Achaemenids get 6, and you're in the same universe as Indians who get 8 shots for 1 point from their light chariots. So these bow levy are kind of the secret sauce, but along with the flexibility of this army. So I think this is the stronger list if you're just looking at it from a competitive perspective. Maybe even for fun, because of the flexibility is fun, right? Getting to try different things.
Okay. So it's still going to be probably a shooting focused warband, no matter.
But people say that, but I actually think this is more of a melee army. But we'll go through the abilities. The viewers can make their own conclusion. I think the shooting output here is actually quite a bit less than like the Indians, but there's some very strong melee abilities in here.
Okay, so some kind of mix between the two might find success here.
This is a good combined arms warband. You want to have some shooting and some strong melee, plus 1 really unusual trick. Good choice here, especially the Achaemenids.
All right, so people at this point are familiar with elephants, so no need to reiterate there. I believe is this the only warband that can take the scythe chariots, or is
successors? One of the successors, I think, can take them. Yeah. I mean, I've never seen them used with the Persians. They're barely used at all, from what I've seen. They're a hard unit to use. So, like historical side, normally these were sent in early to disrupt the enemy ranks and then set up whatever's going to follow, right, to make it successful. Because they're chariots that have sights sticking out of them, right? So they're going to disrupt the enemy formation, but they're not necessarily going to kill the enemy. They're just to disrupt it, right? The way they work in Saga is more like you hold them behind your lines to try to counterpunch. It doesn't make sense to me anyways.
So their rules, just loosely, if they have a fatigue, basically, they'll never do what they're supposed to. So they need to be fresh, so that limits their range. And then when they do go in, they do a number of hits depending on the size of the enemy unit, but they're automatically destroyed. So just kind of mathematically, I don't feel like losing a half a point for sure necessarily. Well, I would say most of the time you might not even kill more than half a point. I don't know if you've.
Well, I can tell you the one time I faced them was my successor opponent, Bob Boggs, you mentioned. He tried them against my Median Persians. And it was just what you said, because the Median Persians in particular can have rock-hard melee defenses. He charged into me and basically did almost nothing. But since the chariots auto-killed, even though Median Persian combined formations don't do any offense, output was like a gift to me. I actually have a hard time killing stuff in melee, but that's not true when the unit self-destructs.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting unit. Didn't really kind of add up mechanically to be a common choice. But if anybody has made them work at home, definitely comment below. Let us know. The secret sauce there. Yeah, they look cool. Just another chariot. I think we're up to 5 or 6 different kinds of chariots now. So just another icing on the cake. All right. So I think you told me that you primarily play the Median Persians. That's
true.
Right?
I've done a bit of light proxying and played the Achaemenid version a few times as well, but primarily Median Persians, yes.
Okay. So as we go through the battle board abilities, obviously that's going to kind of color your response and comments. I mean, I'm sure you'll kind of chime in as how you see the Achaemenids might be slightly different, or, probably just going to be a lot more options on the abilities, with all these different units in play. So for the medians though, so like what kind of composition do you like to take for those guys, just to get us in the mind?
Yeah, so this will be a little clearer when we get into the board, but kind of the baseline for me is, well, let me first say that I kind of built my army more for what I thought looked cool and for diversity than for power. So if I were building it for power and I were playing the medians, I would probably do 5 points of warriors and 1 point of mercenaries. Okay. If mercenaries are allowed, and we'll talk about the mercenaries later on, because there's 2 of them, one in particular that just sets this board on fire, and it's another reason why they have the reputation they do. And then you can split it is the idea, right? So very commonly I've got 3 points of combined warriors and 2 12-packs, and then you would have ideally 2 8-packs of mounted warriors, and then your mercenary. I have tried the Javelin Levy a few times, so I can talk a little bit about what's good or bad about that. It's not strongly supported by most of the board, but it brings a few things if you wanted to try it. It's not the most powerful option, but you could switch it. So if you wanted to, you could run like a 7 combined, a 9 combined, and put more into the horses. And there's very strong justification for that, depending on what it is you're trying to do on the mission, because there's actually some very robust melee abilities here that if you run in with the 12-pack of mounted warriors, you could put some hurt on the unprepared opponent.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So, yeah, you're going to be a mix then, just really slow shooting units and then fast, kind of hard-hitting melee units.
Yeah, your bane here is a couple things are your bane here. The 2 big things you're going to have struggle with medians is, 1, terrain. There's terrain, or the opponent's in terrain. You have nothing. Your horses don't want to go in it.
Yeah, nobody.
Your combined guys don't want to go at it. And if they're in it, they're harder to shoot. Your only real tool is your warlord, putting him on foot. But then I guess you have something that can go in there, but the board doesn't really want you to do that with him, which we'll see. There may be some mercs that are kind of okay in that situation, but usually in a tournament, you can't swap out. But the other bane is stuff like, the big one is, here's a real-life successors list. It's all phalanx infantry, plus the camel mercenary, plus a elephant. So now, every single one of their units carries an inherent no Saga die passive benefit against your only offensive unit.
Yeah.
So there's no target to choose. They all have a +1, or you got a -1, or who knows, maybe both. They got auto hits. Yeah. So that's where the medians are limited. As I said, if you're running the Achaemenids, you could see that opponent and totally switch up what you put. The foot guys, suddenly they shine there, right? Like they have no benefit against my 4/4 warriors. So yeah, I put my own camels down if I want to.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's going to be my question on the warlord. Do you put them on foot and kind of hang them in terrain, actually, maybe like the 1 unit
You
on the back
could.
of your line,
that's
or you put them on a horse?
But there's abilities here that are so good for mounted that there's one in particular. There's two that you lose as soon as you put him on foot. That you got to have a really good reason to put him on foot, and he's not that great when he is. So does it really solve the problem? If not, probably you're still keeping him mounted.
Okay. Oh, cool. All right. Well, let's just get to the board then. Let's go. Let's dive in. So, I believe, I'm hoping everything up top looks the same.
It does.
Is it different?
Standard.
Okay.
So this is, I think, rated a 1-star board by the designers. If I remember this one, and
should be easy to play. Right.
I actually think as we go through this, you'll see that I called it a weird board. That's mainly because of one ability. Overall, it's fairly direct. What it does. It doesn't have weird like off-cycle moves or shifting fatigue around on the opponent. It's actually a pretty direct board.
Cool. Well, up top on the left here, probably the most infamous ability, and so this wasn't changing the fact, correct? It's just what's on the battle board is what it is at the moment, right?
So earlier when I said people thought something else was going to be changed, it was this, but it wasn't. So this is just played as it's written right now.
Yeah, so some people want this to change. I'm curious your opinion from running the board, but it's a common, uncommon, orders or orders reaction. So choose a non-mercenary unit of warriors or levies more than medium away from all enemy units. Put all the figures this unit has lost since the start of the game back in the formation, and this unit counts as eliminated at the end of the game. So, whatever. You're talking about 12-man units. I've seen 12-man units frequently used with this. So you'll get the opponent gets the full victory points, but essentially they've already eliminated some of the figures. But you get them all back, and you can kill the enemy good with this resurrected unit from there on out. I guess what are your thoughts on the ability?
Yeah, so I mean, probably worth talking about this one because this is the controversial ability on the board, the one that people that say this army is quote unquote broken, too powerful, particularly with Achaemenids, will often point to this ability, and I think this is what drives it, right? And this is a very strange ability in Saga. So you got to kind of take it apart. First, it's orders or orders reaction. So as written, I can use this at the start of my turn, or potentially, if you want to think about it, at the end of my turn. It does have some conditions tied to it. So it doesn't work for Hearthguard. Obviously, it doesn't work for heroes, though. How would it, right? And it doesn't work for mercenaries. And it also doesn't work if the unit's dead. So if it's been completely eliminated, you can't shove it back on the board. It's gone. And then lastly, I think one of the trickier limitations is that it has to be more than M away from every single enemy unit. So if you're thinking, I'm going to play this after a melee, unless you wipe the enemy and there's no one else around, that alone is not going to happen. You have to have a better plan, right? Because you're within S to start with. But if you set all that aside for a second, the effect clearly has the potential to be enormously powerful. It does kill the remainder of your unit. So if you've got, it's one of the challenges as a Persian general with this ability as it's written is, when do you play it? Because as I said, it doesn't work when the unit's dead. So you're always in this kind of seesaw, or for me anyway, I'm always in this seesaw of, I got 5 guys left. Should I kill the unit and bring it back? I'm feeding them a bunch of victory points, but if they finish it off, I can't use it at all, right? So that's one challenge with using this ability. But if you can do it right, at its peak, right? I've got 1 point of levy, and I've done this with my javelins. I got 1 javelin guy left, and I'm putting 11 back on the board. Well, it's discouraging for the opponent, right? Now, you can tell them, like, hey, well, the unit's dead, though, but there's still 12 guys on the board again. You got to kill them all again. And it does create a and this is why people want it changed, I think. In the hands of a skilled, competitive edge player, you can do things with this, I think, that create an extremely oppressive experience for the other player. Used in a kind of casual environment where it's like, well, I brought 1 guy back, baby, and I had to kill him when they had 5, so you picked up a bunch of points. It's kind of thematic, which is what they were going for here. But when it's used in a determined way, like I deliberately charge my 12 pack into you, do some damage. I have another activation to pull them back in, and I'm putting them all back on the table. And now the rest of my game plan is to just keep charging you with this unit that scores you nothing. Stuff like that, I think, is very... It's not the best game experience, I would say.
Yeah, it's like a weird dynamic, too. From your opponent's perspective, they already have the points. So they never want to interact with this unit ever again.
And
so
you want to use it all the time.
Yeah, so but you as the player, like, well, these, you know, they're the ultimate expendable unit at this point. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So I'm looking at the thing here. Can you use this on the same unit over and over?
Can. And that's where it really gets oppressive, right? So I slammed the 12 pack into you, killed all but 3. I bring them back. I charge you again 2 turns later. Then I charge you again the next. Actually, I'll throw them at you as many times as I can, right? And I might bring them back a second or even a third time. Now, before people get too excited about the right, it's 2 dice. And this is a board, especially with medians, you don't have many Saga dice because to get to 12 figures, you tend to be merging, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, when I play them, often this is kind of a tax. I almost think of it like the Carolingians with their 3 dice at the top. I kind of got 2 dice that just go here right away, and they have to wait. Because when you want to use it, is a bad turn. It's a turn like something just got wiped out. I need dice. It's not generating the Saga dice. So there's a little bit of that in there, but it's very strong, undoubtedly. As someone who's played the medians, my concern is when you talk about weakening this ability, which I think is, I don't work for Studio Tomahawk. I think it's almost inevitable because the player feedback is pretty strong against this overall. Mm-hmm. We'll go through the rest of the board. This army has there's one other thing we'll talk about here. They have no actual shooting defense. Their actual shooting defense is numberless hordes.
Okay.
But because you get shot up, there's nothing here that works against that. And the way you defend against it is say, well, you shot 10 of my 12 guys off, but actually they're all just back now to shoot at you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess we'll see as we go through here.
Yeah.
And you're right about a 2 dice ability. Typically, you're going to be using this as the reaction, would you say? Because if it's orders, that's like at the start of your orders phase. So your opponent has played their whole turn and kind of knows whether they left a unit within medium or not. They can make special efforts to make sure you can't trigger this on your turn.
Right. So I've seen it suggested that this should be limited to orders only, at which point I can tell you, playing the army, I will never get to use it when it helps me. Because all that it takes is they got 1 tip of 1 base within M of my depleted combined formation so that I get 1 shot against that unit with the depleted unit, and then I can't play this. Now, if they want me to kill it, then they'll just be outside of M at the end of their turn. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the answer is, but making it orders only, to me, this is just a dead ability against any skilled opponent, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, and you're right, it's 2 dice. So anybody who's played the Mutata, they have a great kind of orders reaction that's 2 dice. And if you're loading that up, it's pretty difficult to like mount any kind of attack. And especially if you're kind of going to be lower on Saga dice anyways with your larger units, as you say. So it's almost like either this is your game plan and you're kind of playing and building around it, or you're kind of not, it might not come up organically or incidentally often unless you're kind of trying to make it happen.
I've won games without playing this once. Mm-hmm. I've lost games where I've played it, I think twice, maybe 3 times.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so jury's not out. Alexander will get a fact at some point. Maybe this will be in it. Maybe it won't, but we shall see. All right, heading down to King of Kings. That's a badass name for an ability, if I've heard one. For a single, I think the tree is the common, right?
It is.
Orders reaction at the start of each melee or shooting attack till the end of the turn. Each enemy unit within line of sight and within L of your warlord must discard an attack die before rolling their attack dice. So obviously, if you get the warlord kind of out there in a prominent position, could have quite an effect. Small effect. You need multiple combats or melees, or if they're shooting at you, shooting for it to add up. Do you find the dice to
No.
put this here?
This is, as you say, it's unfortunate because there's some cool abilities names on this board, but this is the one, right? This is the one that should be.
Yeah, it should be
like, yes,
warlord only.
The opponent dreads me playing. Most of my opponents, if they saw me playing this, would be like, yeah, he wasted a saga dice, sweet. So the problems with this, right? The effect is very minimal. It's one fewer attack dice. Now we're talking about a universe in which you're facing things like Indian elephants that can get 8 automatic hits on you, and you're facing successors that can very plausibly roll into you with like 20 attack dice carrying a +2. So one die, almost. Now it could help against some things, right? So I mentioned earlier the javelin swarm from Numidians.
Yeah,
perhaps.
If that's their game plan, yeah.
Here's the problem. You have to be within L and within line of sight. But what does that mean about your warlord? Well, they're not going to shoot the rest of my army. They're going to go nuke my warlord turn 1 because he's to be in line of sight, he's exposed to some degree, right? Now, this is, if you're going to take the foot warlord, maybe this is more viable because he's a little harder to kill. Maybe he's in terrain and you've positioned such. It might be usable. I just think it's very easy for an opponent to put together a strong turn and not be at all dissuaded by this. And you need the dice for other things.
Yeah, so the enemy has to be with an L of the warlord. It's not like your unit needs to be
and line of sight.
L and line of sight. So, I mean,
just swing around the side.
All bows unaffected. If you think about javelins, you can easily position a unit to attack, and your units would have to be pretty close to enforce this against shooting. So
it has one
right.
use, which is very late game. You're trying to pick up points, and they got those depleted units. It's always nice to not, cut down the number of dice. And there's one other ability here we're going to get to in a second. Removing the few attack dice they have, there is value in that. So that is the one time I used it effectively was I don't want to take a chance with my warlord. So I'm just going to make sure they have no attack dice when I go to mop up this, 4-man Sarissa unit.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So at the end of the game, there's more impact of taking somebody down from 3 to 2 attack dice versus, in your example, going from 20 to 19 attack dice. Isn't, 5% versus 33% of your attacks being discarded in that situation. So cool. Yeah. And you always, at the end of the game, you'll probably have a common for sure. So that it'll always be an option at the end of the game.
It's good for that.
Whether you want to use it or not.
He's in line of sight and he's probably charging something that's vulnerable. Maybe something wants to close ranks. It's good for that. Maybe.
True. Yeah. So at that point, the objectives are kind of set, that there's like some sort of pivotal moment that it's going to be happening, and you can kind of focus, where it's going to be, what units are going to be partaking. So you can have a larger impact towards the end of the game versus just as a blanket thing at the beginning. It's too easy for your opponent to circumvent it, or they just eat it because it has almost no impact. So
yeah, so this is the shooting reaction. The actual defense against shooting on this board that's not combat bonus is this ability. Thing is, if you're like, well, the Indians are going to come out and shoot me 40 times, A, this barely chips away at that, and B, actually what they'll probably do is shoot at my warlord 36 times and kill him, right? Especially if he's mounted, he's dead for sure. So yeah, in theory, this is supposed to help me deflect shooting. In practice, I've never found a way to use it like that. Maybe someone else has. I'd love to hear it in the comments if you're like, hey, actually, this ability is awesome, and here's how I used it. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Well, let's move down to keep your distance. This is an uncommon melee ability. Your opponent must discard 2 attack dice, or 3 if your unit is in combined formation. So a little bit more impactful. No range component with your warlord, discarding 2 or 3 attack dice. People just hate losing their attack dice. They'd rather you just gain attack dice, I find. So this is particularly annoying. Is it worth it for an uncommon little boat?
Well, that's the question with this one. I have used it and gotten good results with it, but you are always struggling for the uncommon. We will see many more abilities that want it later on. If you're running Achaemenids, you've got bow levy you really want to shoot with, so you may want it there. Now, there's some help for that later on, but still, That's going to be a factor. And we saw Unnumbered Hordes. And Unnumbered Hordes, that's got an uncommon facing in it. We'll see some others that do. That said, if you're running medians like me, it's 3 dice versus 2, but that's pretty solid. And remember, the obvious use of this is to defend your combined formation. You can also, though, use this when you're attacking with your horsemen. So taking away the dice that they have, especially they close ranks, can be quite good here, even if it's just 2. It also sometimes when you, this sounds crazy, sometimes you got to charge with the combined formation to clear an objective. Sure. And you don't have a lot of attacks, but between this and King of Kings, potentially you can take 4 of their attacks. And that, in its own way, might help you win the melee. Yeah. So it has some interesting uses, I think. But there's stiff competition we'll see here on the rest of the board for that uncommon.
Okay. Yeah, and it's actually like the lower your armor, the better it is. You know, so I don't know if you can really activate Levy any other way, but using this with Levy, like those will probably be 2 hits that you're discarding versus if you're popping this on your Warlord or Hearthguard or something, it's like, well, those probably weren't going to hit anyways, you know. So the impact is a little
that's different. Not true, Rodge. You know, if you're charging Levy, they always hit your Hearthguard.
That's true. I mean, they're going to get Hearthguard into Levy. Don't even bother playing anything. They're going to get the hits anyways. Yeah.
Somehow they'll have like 2 dice and hit me 3 times. So use this somewhere else. Yeah.
All right. Down to Sagaris. You can use any die you want here. It's a melee ability. Do you know what Sagaris means?
I think it's this kind of like axe type weapon that they had, or it's almost like a pickaxe type thing that they have. I think that's what it's referring to. Yeah,
I think I've seen those on the models.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Gain 2 attack dice, or 4 if your unit has no ranged weapons. So for your medians, that would be the horsemen versus the foot sloggers in combined formation. If you use a rare, you can reroll 1s and 2s on your attack dice. So pretty tasty. Rerolls, right? You hit on 3s, you can reroll everything.
This is our introduction to. So when I look at Saga boards, one of the themes that I think I see on them, maybe I'm imagining it, is that some of the war bands that I think are more known as like either imperial war bands or that were famous for a king or a big leader person that was of some nobility. So I'll just say like the Normans. That's one a lot of people know about. This board also has this theme of, to me, feeling very meh with the medians anyway, unless you get the rares, and then it lights up, right? And here's our first example of that. There's maybe even better ones later on. If you get the rares, this board just takes on a whole nother dynamic. And here's our first example, because as you say, if I'm rolling into like 3/3 Jav Cav, rerolling 1s and 2s is incredible. But even if I don't have the rare, this is an outstanding ability for the right list. And this is where, again, Achaemenids will shine, because you've got regular warriors that can close ranks. Well, if you got 1 point of them, they close ranks, they're right back up to 8 attack dice with a common.
Yeah, so even like you're playing defensive, but you still got the full attacks.
Or 12 when they're charging. And this goes with the cavalry. I use this with my cavalry all the time because, yes, an 8-pack is suddenly 12, a 12-pack is 16. It's starting to add up and look pretty scary even without the rerolls. It can also make, we'll talk a little bit about lists maybe later on. If you like the meme lists and run the small 4-pack activator cavalry, which we'll see later on, it's a chance to double the attack dice of your dice generator 4-pack cav.
Sure.
For common, so no one likes to have 8 attack dice thrown at them by 4 warriors.
That's cool. Yeah, great ability. Obviously, rerolls get a lot better. Bigger the pile you have. So how much are the rares fighting each other on this board? Is
Quite a lot.
The first spot for a
this
rare?
This is not the first spot I put. The common version of this I'm using all the time. Because even with the combined guys, as I said, if they close ranks, they go down to, with the way I run them, 3 to start with, but very quickly it could be 2 as they lose models. There's something to be said, again, for just going from 2 back up to 4 or 3 back up to 5, if that's the target they've chosen to attack. So this ability, the rare, if I'm rolling them all hot, but it goes other places first.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, at least you got somewhere Sometimes the rares don't have a place to go necessarily on some boards, but this is good. Yeah,
Yep.
you never regret putting it there. All right, coming down to possibly you're going to say one other ability that people just seem to have an issue with. Probably this one here. So one volley after another uses a common or a rare. Units equipped with bows, so it could be those bow levies or the combined formation. Fellas, after resolving this shooting attack, so first you have to shoot somehow using wheel bay or spending a dice. Okay, so you're popping this during step 2 of that. So you're going to spend a common or uncommon. You get to activate your unit to shoot again at the same target. So really, it's additional activation for that first part. If you use a rare, repeat this process once more after the new shooting attack, this time with 2 bonus attack dice. At the end of all these activations, remove a fatigue from your unit. So yeah, is this where the basically shooting twice or 3 times with the rare? Is this where the rare goes for you or no?
Well, so first I feel like, so we talked about Unnumbered Hordes, and I said, I think I was trying to be candid. Like, I absolutely see why some people think that ability is very problematic. It can lead to unfun games, and probably something needs to be done with it. So, and I generally agree with that. I got some concerns about changing it, but I agree with that. This ability is like the opposite. People lose their minds over this ability, and I think know why.
It's fair. If you use the command, basically you're shooting twice.
Right. So let's start with mediums.
And it'll be fatigue free for that one. But
it's
okay,
not,
you do
except
your.
It's not exactly right.
Comment,
so let's just baseline. So if anybody in any army that can take bow warriors takes a point of bow warriors, what can they always do for 2 commons? Shoot them back to back at the same target. That's what this does for a common, with one exception, and it's a conditional exception that's often highly significant. You get to remove a fatigue after the second activation, which is not quite the same thing as a fatigue-free activation, and it has to be the same target. Real life, often that's not what you want to do. I shot the first target, and I took it from 5 to 3 models. I don't want to shoot that target again. I want to shoot the other target because I already took this Saga die and I want to start working. But no, here I'm streamlined. Even worse, because it compels me to shoot the same target twice without knowing what's going to happen. If it had 2 models in range of me, and I happen to kill those 2 with the first shot, guess what happens to the second one? The dice is gone. It's lost. Okay. Now, the problem there's another problem with that before we get to the rare version. If we read the text here, it says, at the end of all these activations, remove a fatigue from your unit. I generally have charitable opponents that will read that as, in my earlier example, well, you didn't get to do the second activation, but still you can remove the fatigue if you have one. A different reading of it is, it's at the end of all these activations. You haven't done all these activations because one was canceled. You don't get to remove. It's plural, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to remove the fatigue if that happens. So if they have an activation to reaction to run away, you're going Age of Melee and you're like into Vikings and they exhaust you on the first one. So there's some very real limitations here. Now let's go to Achaemenids before we go to the rare. Achaemenids is a different story, and this is part of why I think they're more powerful. To get a levy activation for a common itself, in my opinion, could be an advanced Saga ability. That's great, right? So now I'm getting efficiency when I go with the levy. A, the activation is 6 shots instead of 4 for a point. B, I'm replacing an uncommon requirement with a common, which frees up the common for, as we saw it, maybe keep your distance to defend my levy. Maybe I needed it for Unnumbered Hordes, right? So with levy immediately, one volley after another does become harder. And again, the theme for me here is when I hear Persians are so strong at shooting, most of the time when I ask, someone's playing against an Achaemenid list with at least 2 points of levy. So that powers this up. Now, there is a rare version, right? The rare version, a little trickier. Because for the warriors, I'm getting 2 activations for a rare. Again, I don't think that's great value because anyone could activation pool their rare into at least 2 commons, you would hope. Right? That's like kind of the minimum expected result of activation pool, right? So 2 activations for a rare of a warrior bow is actually also still the baseline. But here again, I'm restricted. All 3 of these shots need to hit the same target. If they can't, it stops. The third one does get 2 bonus dice here. So that's not nothing. But again, when we go to the levy, 2 extra levy activations for a rare with 2 bonus dice on the last one. Sometimes you're forced to activate the levy once with a rare because you got nothing else to do it.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Value is strong on this for the levy. For the warriors, in age, a simple comparison. The Indians for a common get to activate a unit equipped with bows for a move and then shoot it afterwards, fatigue-free. So they get a move and a shoot or a common fatigue-free, including levy. That is much more threatening than this ability in terms of shooting. Because one of the other problems here with this is it doesn't move your unit. And often the opponent is like scared. They don't want to get shot, right? And your unit only moves S if you're running combined. So they've got like 2 models in range of 2 of your guys, and you got to move first, which just layers on the fatigue. So again, I don't quite get the hype on this ability. I think there are vastly better shooting abilities in Saga. There are better shooting abilities in Age of Alexander, but you're right, people don't like it. And if you're running the bow levy, it's pretty good with the bow levy.
Good value, yeah. Yeah, like you say, you got to make sure your unit's kind of well in range because you don't want to be like at the maximum range and they just remove 1 or 2 guys and then you're out of range for the following shot. So yeah, between everything you said, it's not there's a lot of nuance going on here with how this ability works. So
it's kind of funny because like if you ran bow warriors with Romans or whatever and we're like, you started within range of me and I just put down 3 commons where we obey and 2 commons, was like, I'm shooting. Everyone would be like, that's Saga, it's the basics. And it would be actually better than this in some situations because each of those could switch targets.
Correct.
But this one, people lose their minds about it. I don't understand it.
You need everything lined up perfect. It's pretty good, but
it has
some downsides.
They roll a unit into L on their turn and stop. They don't attack you or damage you in any way, and it's like a big unit. Yes, this is great, but so are many other shooting abilities under that situation. Right. The Indians actually will put out way more damage than I will under those circumstances.
All right. Well, spoken enough on this one. Let's pop down to Ahura Mazda's Flame. So it's another badass name for an ability. The last 3 used a rare, potentially. Common, rare, melee, mounted unit, or unit in combined formation. So probably your whole army if you're playing the medians. Gain 3 defense dice. If you use that beautiful rare elephant, your defense dice get a +1 bonus. The Holy Grail, defense dice, and the +1 to the defense dice. Many boards can do one or the other. Got both right here in one ability. So I'm surprised Monty hasn't picked up this faction alone, just based off this one ability here. All right. So, yeah, is this where the rare goes?
This is typically my first rare. Now, there's one other one that could be, it's very situational. Sometimes it's the better choice, in my opinion. This is by default. Like, you get that pre-roll of 3 dice. It's either going here or it's going on activation pool. Because, as I said, I'm starved for dice most of the time with medians. But this one is, if like an advanced ability, this is usually going to be it. Because, as you say, this is so when you're medians, this has a slightly different look than it does if you're Achaemenids. And I have to clarify that. When you're medians, this is your entire army, potentially. Because all you have are combined formation warriors and mounted warriors. And your warlord, who's also mounted, potentially. So everyone can use this. And I love abilities that affect my entire army because my opponent can't dodge them. No matter who you fight, I can use it. this one works that way. Now, when you go to Achaemenid, and this is a theme on the board as well, they have a lot of tools in their toolbox. They have a lot of efficiency advantages. Like bow levy is better also with unnumbered hordes, right? Because you're just getting more bodies for a point. So I still think they're better, but only some of your units, potentially none of your units, other than your warlord, might be able to use Ahura Mazda's flame if you. I went with the hoplite guy. Well, you can't do that, right? But I went with just a bunch of foot warriors and bow levy and a merc. Actually, no one can use this except your warlord there. So this is, as a median player, I probably have a bias towards this, but I think anyone would look at this and say, +1 and 3. The other area where this shines, though, is against elephants. And I play against elephants all the time. So again, your biases are who you play against, right? We don't actually want to close ranks with your combined formation warriors. But so here I get the same effect. But if they send the Sarissa guys in, I can close ranks and get another +1 on top of it, in which case even successors may have a hard time removing a meaningful number of models.
Yeah, it kind of sets you up if you have to do an unpalatable charge or something against those Sarissas, the camels, or the elephant. It's a little more acceptable if you can counteract it with this. But yeah, solid ability, definitely as the medians. All right, let's pop up to the top, or was it the bottom?
This is the second one on the right side, I think.
Second one, median cavalry. All right, 2-die ability here. Common and uncommon. So unnumbered hordes, is that a common and an uncommon?
It is.
As well. All right, we got some direct competition here. Melee mounted unit, your attack dice get a +1 bonus. The enemy unit is infantry, gain 3 attack dice. So Saga Thursday guests are very picky when it comes to 2-dice abilities. Does this one pass the test for you?
It usually does, but as we said earlier, we've already seen, and we're not done, this board is hungry for uncommons, so just because you want to use an ability doesn't mean you can and have any impact on the battlefield. So that is usually where this falls down, and also, it is very restricted. So first of all, it's only your mounted units. Now, in a median list, that's probably the only unit, that unless you took a foot warlord, which is, like I said, here's these two abilities, part of why I take the mounted warlord, right? Ahura Mazda's flame and this, you kind of want them. It's great. Again, with the Achaemenids, there's many units in your army that potentially can't use this, including potentially, you got foot warriors or whatever, but it can be used with camels. They're mounted, so that's solid. Camels. But finding the dice for it is the trick, of course. I look at a lot of Saga abilities, like, what am I getting? What can other people deploy against me? Now, it's out of age, but to me, the gold standard +1 is Britons. For 2 commons, they get a +1 for any unit, attacker, or defender, and an additional effect if they're galvanized. This is a common plus an uncommon, so it's pricier. It's mounted only, and the additional effect is, in this case, against infantry. So it's probably fairly priced. I think it becomes shockingly good used with someone who's really, I'll just say, gaming unnumbered hordes. Because when you're doing the charge after charge after charge with the zombie cavalry, as some people call them, and you're layering median cavalry on top, very scary. But the other play I've used with this, I've sometimes put down a 7-pack of mounted warriors to get things to pencil out. Very high efficiency here. If you run this and Sagaris with the common, you will go to 14 attack dice with a +1 against an infantry unit from 7 cavalry. Doubling the attack dice and giving them a +1, hard to win that battle.
It's pretty good, yeah. So as always, it's dependent on how many dice you're chucking. It's probably turns 1, 2, or 3 when those units are still fresh and viable and big and juicy, or they've been resurrected.
They've been resurrected. That's the magic.
Hordes, yeah. So yeah, not a bad ability. I guess you probably had a rare for Sagaris. I'd probably say you get more bang for your buck possibly with that one, but definitely a good combination.
Solid with the mounted warlord because he always has his 8 dice, right? So, and against infantry, now he's got 11 dice with a +1. he's either dead or he's throwing 8 dice and against infantry 11 here. So I do like it with the mounted warlord.
Nice. Yeah. So he'll be good even at the end of the game. As long as he's alive, he'll still be rocking a decent number of dice. So, all right. Moving down to Concentrated Volley. This is an activation using a common. Choose an enemy unit. Roll a die for each of your units with a ranged weapon that has this enemy unit within range and line of sight of at least one of its figures. For each result above its armor against shooting, it takes a casualty. So it's kind of like a free little, just a little something extra, you know, not going to fatigue anybody to squeeze out a little extra shot here. Any wild success stories?
Yes, I've used this to help kill a Rodge on elephant.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's just a casualty, so
it's a casualty.
It just bypasses.
People don't like this
Saga abilities outright. Yeah,
I get it, because you like read it and you're like, I'm not spending a Saga die on this. Is crazy. But I think there's a little more nuance to it than that. It is not a shooting activation, and this board, as not to spoil the last 2 abilities, this board has no fatigue management other than one volley after another, which is an unreliable fatigue management, as we just talked about, and only helps your shooting unit, your bow units, rather. This is a chance to strike at somebody without incurring an additional fatigue.
Yeah. Exactly.
Bypasses defenses. Successors with a rare can throw 6 defense dice as a shooting reaction. I don't care what you've got. You're not hurting them in that shooting. But this just goes right past that. It is very warband dependent. So I used the Merc that is the Scythian cavalry. They're composite bow guys. Now that lets you plausibly have 3 guys with ranged weapons. If you take the javelin guys, maybe 4. If you can get to 3 against an armor 4, even armor 3, jab cab or whatever, I think it's actually pretty good value. You have a solid chance at removing 1 or 2 models and bypassing anything except your own initial roll. No saves, no defenses.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, and I'm sure there's turns too, scenarios where you're just kind of moving up your combined formation guys, and you know, sometimes even probably double moving them or something like that. So you know, this at least lets you kind of reach out and do something and affect the battle that turn where they're just kind of hustling, you know. They can contribute at least in some aspect.
It's demoralizing too. People hate to not get to roll saves. I don't know. Mathematically, I don't think it's that great, but there's a psychological to Saga. Right?
Yeah, and definitely great against that exhausted enemy warlord. I'd be crapping in my pants
Just
if you had
one.
this lined up. Yeah, definitely some options for you. All right. Coming down to Combine Arms using the beautiful uncommon activation. Activate as many infantry units as you have non-hero cavalry units, or activate as many mounted units as you have non-hero infantry units. Isn't that like the same number usually, or is it the non-hero part? That's the key difference there. Yeah, it's just something. Okay.
So here's why I don't like this ability. So I love mass activations, don't get me wrong. But what I don't like about this is it does 2 things. One probably more problematic than the other. The first is it really kind of straitjackets you in how you build your army. So
yeah, ideally to maximize this, exactly half your army would be mounted and the other half would be infantry, and then that's
half the units.
Half the units. Yeah, so that's how you would maximize the activations.
That's the gaming part, right? So I've had people tell me they played against an actual Persian list, Achaemenids, 4 points of bow levy, 2 points of warriors mounted that were in 4-packs, so that with this they activated 4 levy to shoot. And that is my other problem with this, is that it invites what I call meme lists or just extreme gaminess to get the most value out of it. I would compare this to the Successors multi-activation, which one I don't think is like this. So for a common, they get to activate 2 units. There's some other options too, right? It could be 3, it could be with a rare, but like the baseline is for a common, activate 2 units, 1 has to be a phalanx. Now what's great about that to me is like, how are you going to play the Successors and not have phalanx units.
Got
that, and then it's totally open. Like, do you want bow levy? Do you want jav cav? Do you want elephants? Do you want scythe chariot? You know, like, it's, I don't know if you can do them. They're mercs. But anyways, that to me doesn't invite gaminess, and it doesn't constrict the list building outside of what, I mean, like having to field 2 or 3 phalanx units as successors would be like complaining about warriors as Vikings. Like, what army did you think you were signing up for, right? That's what they have. But this is good. So do I use this? I use it all the time because this is the multi-activation that's available, and it does help with these slow combined formation warriors. So very good there. And while I do say that it straitjackets your list building, when I took the Scythian mercenary in one game, I replaced one of my regular mounted warriors with that. And if you read the text here, I can't activate them. I can't count how many infantry and activate the Scythians with this, but the Scythians count as a non-hero cavalry unit.
Correct. Yeah, they can't activate themselves, but they'll contribute to your
so count, that's cool. Or the camel merc is real good too, and also would do the same thing I just mentioned here. So there is a little flex there and a little creativity you can do, and the ability to activate at least 2 infantry units because I have 2 cavalry units in my army that aren't my warlord. I'll take it. But the uncommon then becomes critical, right? This is my only multiple activation. It's only facing as an uncommon. There's not even a rare version. It has to be an uncommon. And now it's fighting with median cavalry, unnumbered hordes, keep your distance. Maybe one more we're about to see here.
Okay. Interesting. So, yeah, I probably get a couple activations out of it. At the very worst, you can activate some warriors with that uncommon. That turn you roll 5 uncommons on a key turn, and you have nothing but warriors within range.
And it happens
to affect the enemy. Yeah, once per event, it's going to happen. So, all right, cool. Yeah, let's pop down to the last one here. Shield bearers. This is a melee ability. Uses the uncommon or the rare. That'll be combined formation. There's enough text here. I'm just going to defer to you to summarize as best you can.
I call these war and peace abilities because you're like, what? I don't even want to read it.
Hold on, what's happening here?
Unfortunately, has several of them. So this is another thing that I think makes people not like the Persians is because your opponent just starts reading and they won't stop reading when they. And you're like, just tell me what it does.
Pretty long, yeah. I would say 5 of these abilities are pretty long as far. Possibly like the longest. One volley after another might be the longest one.
And again, they're fairly direct, right? So I can see the 1 star, but again, it's just, anyways, it's long. So what does this do for you? So you're going to use it for a unit in combined formation. That's it. So if you're doing the Achaemenid list with no combined guys, actually you can just ignore this ability because you can't use it. If your combined guys are all dead and it's just your horsemen left, again, just forget this. It's a dead space. But for them, it can be really good because it has two effects. The first is the uncommon effect. So here's our other competition for the uncommon. Multiple places on the board want it.
All right.
You're going to roll as many dice as you generate in a shooting attack. So let's go with my army. It's fresh. I've got 12 guys in my combined warrior formation. So it works with the Hearthguard version too. So I generate 6 shooting dice. So I'm going to pick up and roll, even though I'm in melee, I'm going to pick up and roll 6 dice because that's what I generate in shooting. And I have to roll equal to or higher than the opponent's armor against shooting. So we're in melee, but it's almost like I'm shooting at him, right? It's not a shooting attack. It's almost like that. If I get equal or higher, my opponent discards an attack die. Now, before I go on, you can kind of see the picture here. If you had this and keep your distance and King of Kings, you could really make them discard a lot of attack dice here. But you got to hit first. So let's say you hit, on average, 3 you're going to hit with my 6 dice shooting attack here. He gives up 3 attack dice. And if at least 3 are given up that way, he takes a fatigue.
Oh, okay.
It's scary.
So you can use that right away then, right?
Yes, very scary to charge with someone who has this with your 4/4, say, Greek city-states warriors. Because on average, I'm going to put another fatigue on them and take 3 of your attack dice with average luck if I'm fresh. Now, if you use the rare, it's all of the above plus gain 3 defense dice.
Some defense dice, you dog. Did it again.
Competes with the Ahura Mazda's flame. right? Because they're defensive. Right? They don't help me hurt the opponent directly. They defend me. Do I want to have the 3 defense dice and a +1 from Ahura Mazda's Flame with my combined guys? Or do I want to potentially take 3 attack dice, potentially, or more if my dice are hot, right? This one is the gambler's option to me. If you believe,
yes,
you believe in the averages, I think taking 3 of their attack dice in most situations, putting a fatigue on them, and getting 3 defense dice is better than 3 defense dice and the +1. But you got to believe, because you roll cold, it's like nothing. Actually, the uncommon can potentially do nothing here, right? If you miss all your shooting attacks, you don't put a fatigue on them, and you don't take any attack dice, and the uncommon is just gone.
Yeah, so with so the rare is kind of the safe play. You know, you're going to get something even if you completely flub your rolls. You're right. There's not a lot of Saga abilities that, you know, usually they just work or not. There's just a few that require a dice. There's like the Scott's Hearthguard ability.
Right. It's very much like that. I think it's in the same
ability
place on the board,
last
right?
Romans. Yep, it is. So just a few. It used to be the theme for the old Saracens board, but I don't think it was very, very popular, so they axed it. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Way to get rid of attack dice, combining with Sagaris. You know, I mean, you could potentially, you know, roll pretty good. Knock down 4 to 8 attack dice between shield bearers and so
keep your distance.
That's another one. Keep your distance.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah,
it can be crushing. And also, if you're being charged by elephants, sometimes that extra fatigue sets up something for you. Now, when you're medians, usually there is no something. You're in trouble. But you might shoot them, and it could set that up, right? We saw concentrated volley. Maybe they end up exhausted because of this at the end of the melee, and you get that one lucky 5.
There you go.
There he goes. Of course, you get trampled. You actually, I'm not sure. I think you get trampled. That's not a shooting attack. I don't know.
All right. So we've gone through abilities. Kind of paint me a picture here as your battle line moves up. Are you just shooting once, loading up defense for when they come in, or are you kind of over activating shooting? Or obviously it'll depend. But which, I guess, how does the battle play out?
Yeah, so
shooting versus melee.
Typically, so there's a real challenge here, right? First of all, my infantry guys are bad at attacking people in melee. They're pretty good, as we saw. They're pretty good at surviving a melee, but they're not good.
Multiple ways to hold off attacks. I mean, you combine 2 of these abilities, you can kind of just eat an attack outright. If you spread it out with a little luck, you know, you can potentially withstand 2 or even 3 assaults, depending on the board you're up against.
Yeah, and I've done it. I've actually bounced like 3 GCS assaults against one of these guys with the right setup. Now, how do you play them? I think that's the biggest challenge with these guys at a general level versus a scenario level is how to manage fatigue. There is no fatigue management on this board. There's no fatigue-free move. There's not actually a fatigue-free shoot. You might be able to pull a fatigue, but you might not after shooting. There's no pull fatigue after a melee. There's no pull it in your order's reaction phase. So opponents that are crafty against me will often just shove forward a javelin levy, let's say. Like, shoot it, bro. Right? Now, they set it up so that I got to move to get all my guys in range. So that's a move, then it's a shoot, then it's a shoot, maybe a third shoot. They're just feeding in 1 combat bonus at a time. And that's a strong play against these guys because they'll end that typically with 2 fatigue, because they pulled 1 if I used a rare on 1 volley after another. But what did I do? I chipped away a couple javelin levy guys when all was said and done, and I got no way to get those 2 fatigues off my unit. So it kind of is downhill from there. So you do have to manage that carefully. And even with all these defenses, if they're able to melee you when you got 2 or 3 fatigues, you still may die because you're armor 2.
Yeah, so your aggression's lower. They can kind of, depending on the word, they can kind of just kind of raw attack you, you know.
They can, and if they think you're going to close ranks, multiple charges into one of these guys, you're not trying to kill them. So usually what they're trying to do to me is bury me in fatigue. It's low risk because I don't throw attack dice, and then to encircle me, to kind of envelop my unit in there so that I can't use unnumbered hordes. There's no way you're getting away with an S. It would take you like 6 activations to get around these.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Once you kind of load it down with fatigues, your units moving S, I mean, obviously if you're using the cav, it's a little easier to scooch.
Yeah, which is why people do that.
What we're discussing, Yeah. Interesting.
So, but I kind of want to push them forward, but your best scenarios, the scenarios I've done the best on, are ones that allow for a static or slow advance gun line type of play. Someone has to come into me. I do well on my shooting. It sets up the charges later on, and that's pretty good. Where it falls apart for me is, so I'll just use a tournament packet one because everyone has access to that. There's a mission where there's 3 objectives, and you move up and you capture them. You don't even have to stay on them. I lost this 19-1 against successors because turn 1, they moved up. They were Egyptians, so one of them was Levi Sarissa, moved up in front of them. Now I got no way to push them back. I could shoot at them. But realistically, I'm never going to push them off. Turn 2, they capture all those objectives, and they can actually just walk away. Potentially, I could charge them with my cav. They get a +1 against those. So objective-based scenarios, the medians don't have great answers, in my experience. Achaemenids, though, do, because they do have the brawler 4/4 warriors. They have camels if someone's running a lot of cav.
Flexible,
Charlie
just different troop types. Yeah.
There's nothing on this board to me that helps the elephant, but elephant's still good. Sometimes elephant's the answer. Charlie's had a lot of luck with it, so you have that option with them. But it's very tricky to do it on a scenario that's like you got to move quickly and go up and capture ground. And since you can't, they did. And now you got to go, it's even worse because now you got to go take it from them.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Got to win a melee. Yeah.
Achaemenids, though, well equipped to do it. I think it's harder with the medians.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I could see very, very different play style potentially between those two versions. So we're a little long here, but what's your favorite mark that you like to take?
Cappadocians.
Okay, so that's the one with like a little aura of defensiveness, or
they have several benefits
attack too
for Persians. So particularly medians. So they have determination, and I'm dice starved. So that's awesome. They generate a saga die and they have determination straight away. I love it. But then they have the aura, and the aura works post FAQ as long as they have 4 models or more, or I think more than 4 models. It's something like that. Everyone within S that's in melee gets either an extra attack or defense die, which is not nothing. I'll take it, especially the defense die for this army.
Yeah.
And if they get at least 1 6 on their attacks, they get an extra hit. And if they get at least 1 6 on their saves, they get an extra one. Now, that would be good regardless. They're a great merc. I've seen them run with successors. They're awesome no matter what. But this board gives you access to more defense dice, more attack dice, +1 to defense dice, +1 to attack dice. So exploding a single exploding 6, really good.
That's all you need. Yeah, you just need one.
Need one. And this has kept me in games I should have lost badly and turned them into wins because it sounds like so little.
Like, I rolled another 6. It's going to happen sometimes. Yeah,
I only threw 3 dice, but 1 was a 6, so it's actually 2 hits on you, friend. Right? So that's my favorite. I think the camel merc can be really good. Again, they have determination. They've got a good composite bow shot. Camels are just good. They got some other tastiness bonus dice in their composite bow shot. They actually synergize with concentrated volley. So I think the camel merc could be good, but for me, it's usually Cappadocians.
Good. Awesome. Well, do you have fun playing the Persians?
I don't know. I think I would have more fun playing the Achaemenids for the reasons we talked about earlier. The medians feel very much like my plan to win is that they advance slowly enough I can shoot them off the table, which is kind of a non-interactive way of playing. But on certain missions, I feel like there's literally nothing. Like earlier, I said, like, I have nothing that's good against Sarissas. I have nothing that's good against their elephant. I have nothing that's even really good at mailing other than my cav who don't want to charge into Levi Sarissa or regular Sarissa. they actually shoot more than me because they got these free shots that are coming in. So I'm not sure that I think part of the reason I don't play it as much is because it's just, I don't know that it creates for me the most fun experience. But I think if I had built an Achaemenid army initially, I'd probably play it a bit more. Because I think with more normal troops, if you will, it would probably be more fun to play.
Sure. Okay, a little expansion maybe in your future there. There's definitely a lot of options to play around with, and different. You can see the media are just a very different style than what you could potentially do. And you're really kind of locking yourself in to a specific kind of play style with that board versus the other one. So
you can run them as cav swarm, but that's a lot of horses to pay. Like, you could definitely run 5 points of warriors that are all mounted. You could do that, probably be pretty good.
No, I want to say I think I've seen Charles maybe had 2 units of 12 camels.
Yeah,
I don't think I imagined that. I think I saw that. So
that's very scary.
You got a lot of options there. All right. Well, Dan, thanks for coming on. Very thoughtful in your discussion here and comments. I can tell you're a big Saga fan. Thanks for being so prolific on the Discord, keeping it going sometimes when things slow down. Gossard is there to pick things up. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Rodge. Appreciate you having me on. It's pretty cool. I've watched pretty much all the videos on this channel, so great to be here.
All right. Yeah, well, we'll have to have you on again sometime. But I think that'll do it for this one. So I do want to, before I move on, thank John, Patrick, Mitchell, Scott, Frank, Britt, DJ, Robin, and the rest of the Saga Thursday patrons. Dan, you are a patron as well. So thank you, my friend. Wouldn't be doing these extra videos without the patrons. So thanks, guys. And if you have any comments about what you heard, if you got the scythe chariots to work, any kind of crazy Achaemenid stuff you want to share? What's the craziest number of units activated by? What's that one ability?
Combined arms. How many levy did? Can
what's the mathematic?
Maybe.
Yeah, mathematic maximum there. I'm curious. Sounds. I don't know. It doesn't sound great, but I'm sure it's fun triggering that and telling your opponent how many units you get. Yeah, post below, and Dan or I will comment on it. But that'll be it for this one, guys. We'll check you later. Bye-bye. Saga! If you'd like to see more Saga content, consider joining the Heathen Army over on Patreon, or popping on down to the Saga Thursday Discord server. Links below. Thanks, guys.